Tuesday, January 8th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. With all the talk about the trade wars between the US and China and other countries, this morning I want to talk briefly about trade and what it really is and how we cannot have free and fair trade without sound, honest money. Before that, of course, I'll look at briefly at what the markets are doing this morning. I'm a little early this morning. I'd like to thank again all my subscribers, all the new subscribers for their support for the channel, Patreon, PayPal, even cryptocurrencies, and also for buying merchandise on the Maneco 64 store. One of my favorites is the End the Fed mug. It says, robbing Americans since 1913, End the Fed. It says, at Maneco 64. And over here it says, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I've also put up a new Billy mug for 2019 with a new photo of Billy, if you're interested. And yeah, that's the most important topic in my opinion, ending the Fed and central banks, because it's all related to trade, the money, everything. It all stems from the central bank and the kind of money we use, not only in the US, but all around the world. So it's just before 7 a.m., so I am early today. I'm just going to be fairly brief. We've got spot gold down about $5. It's around $12.8360. We have come off a bit. The high's been $12.90.50. The low $12.81.74. So precious metals a little weaker this morning. Silver $15.55, down about 10. The low's been $15.50 and the high $15.70. The Dow is up 60 points. Dow futures 23,593. Yesterday, the markets, stock markets did finish up fairly strongly, especially the Nasdaq finished up 1.2. The Dow finished up 98 points, S&P 17, but they did come off the highs of the day. They didn't maintain their gains, so markets still not, as I said, I maintain that the top was made actually beginning of last year. I know we made new highs towards October, but in my opinion, I consider it a double top in the Dow, especially. Maybe the S&P, I guess you could say it made a high in October. And I think it's going to be a while before we go back up to that, to make new highs. And a while, I mean months or years. So the Nasdaq this morning is up 0.2%, 6,502. That's the Nasdaq 100 future. Currencies, the pound is at 127.68, down about 10 pips. Euro is down 0.25%, 114.47, and the dollar is up slightly against the yen. It's up 0.15% at 108.87. The dollar index is starting to look like it's keeling over, so that also is a positive, I would say, for precious metals. Dollar yuan, dollar is up 0.25% at 6.86. Oil 48.76 WTI, so it hasn't really moved that much. The bond markets, the 10-year yield is at below 270, 269, so still not pointing to anything really robust in the economy, so to speak. If anything, the bond markets are not seeing, what the stock market has seen, at least since after Christmas Eve, when we've had a bit of a rally here. The yield curve, well, the 1-year T-bill is 258. The 7-year is 258 as well. So it is flat at the moment, the 1s to 7s. We have gone back up above that 2.5%, which is the upper band of the Fed funds target. We have gone up above that, except for the 3-month bill and the 1-month bill. So yeah, things have stabilized a bit. So to trade now, because there's so much talk, of course, about the trade disputes and the trade negotiations between the U.S. and China. And I think it's important to first define what trade is, and what the purpose of trade is. And you need to go back to the smallest unit, which is an individual. And it's frustrating sometimes because it's so much common sense and so self-evident that it's frustrating when you listen to the mainstream economists, to the media, to the so-called experts. And yeah, very frustrating because if you go back to the Austrian school analysis, you trade with someone when you produce something or you provide a service, and you exchange value for value, right? And that's all it is. And countries themselves do not trade with each other. Countries are just political entities. To say that the U.S. Trades with China is not really correct. We have people in the U.S. that trade with people in China. That's all it is. And sometimes people organize themselves into companies, right? In the barter economy, you exchange value for value. You don't exchange value for no value, right? And that's what we need to look at. We need to look at that in the money economy that we have. The money needs to have value. The money needs to be stable. The money needs to be the most marketable commodity. And that's the whole problem we have with trade, and we've had with it for at least since World War I, I would say. Prior to World War I, we were on a true free trade sound money system. Might have not been perfect, but it was a lot better than now. So it didn't matter. There was no IMF, there was no WTO, there's no UN. People just traded amongst each other from country to country. There's no regulation. It was really free. Of course, some countries imposed quotas and import duties on products coming from abroad, and that's mainly how central governments ran themselves, because there's no income tax, especially in the U.S. That's another subject, though. But what I'm trying to say here is that until we have a sound, honest, fixed value for money, and money, of course, is what facilitates indirect exchange. Even though we've seen barter between counterparties in different countries, like Iranian oil sellers. They've been bartering for gold with Turkish oil buyers. And notice that I'm saying Iranian oil sellers. I'm not saying Iran is selling the oil. Countries can't trade. This is what we need to put in our heads, that it's individuals that trade. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. It's going to be a briefer than usual video. Until we abolish these and these central banks, until we have sound and honest money, and the United States is key to this, and so would China be, because they are the two biggest economies in the world. Until we have that, it doesn't matter. We will never have free and fair trade. So, and I'm not going to go on the political aspect here and what I think President Trump is doing. All I'm saying is the mechanism here. One analogy or one example I want to give you is, let's say each individual state in the United States could print its own dollar. It would be a mess, wouldn't it? You could have the Alabama dollar be like worth a lot less than the dollar from Tennessee, and Alabama would be running a trade deficit with Tennessee. It would be a mess. Even though the Federal Reserve note is not a great store of value, it is the only currency used in the United States. So there is no problem with trade amongst its state. And we know, and the reason that works is because it's one political union. But with the world having different political entities, the best money for fair and free trade is sound money. It is gold or silver, or it could even be barter. You allow countries to barter. You allow them to do individuals. If someone in the United States has a crop of soybean, and Chinese have something else in China they want to sell, they should be able to barter that. That's a real free, unregulated market. It might sound very utopian to think that, but until we actually have unregulated markets, until we have sound money, we will never have free and fair trade. Countries will print money to devalue their currency, to sell more, and it's going to be a mess. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I might make a further video later on today or another day, more about what I think has happened in the last 100 years and why the world is in such a mess in terms of trade imbalances, and trade disputes. So what we need to remember really is, in the end of the day, countries don't trade amongst each other. People do. And of course, people sometimes organize themselves into companies, bigger companies. But why shouldn't I be able to trade freely with someone from anywhere in the world? Why does the government have to interfere? And why do we have to use a standard of value that is fraudulent, like fiat money? If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. I wish you a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.